Jim Carrey. Behind the mask.
When Jim was making nothing, he thought he was worth $20 million.
There's a level of obsession and desperation to Jim's life.
So what do you desire now?
Love.
Hi and welcome. I'm Anne-Marie MacDonald. For the second year in a row, Jim Carrey has been denied a chance for an Oscar. Despite the snub, he is still the most successful Canadian movie star ever. A comic genius with a rubber face and a huge amount of energy, he commands record-breaking Hollywood fees. But Jim Carrey grew up on the edge of poverty, and a lot of his superhuman drive springs from a need to fix the past. Here is an artist who has been remaking himself from day one. Jim Carrey is the man of 1,000 faces, but he's still looking for his own.
After a while, hopefully it'll be to the point where I can't walk out in the street. Won't that be fun?
18 years later, is Jim Carrey where he wanted to be? Mobbed by the Hollywood hordes?
What the hell? Holy hell!
Jim Carrey has the uncanny ability to make his dreams come true. And it ain't over yet.
I've been really lucky, man. I'm so lucky. I feel like a frickin' burglar.
Somebody stop me!
Jim Carrey has been unstoppable, now the biggest movie star ever to come out of Canada. His story is a remarkable combination of determination and talent. He was a teenager driven to save his family, and a performer who refused to be crushed by failure.
I think his comedy comes out of the fact that he has an incredible psychodrama and an incredible circus going on in his head and in his guts 24 hours a day, all the time.
People think I'm a schizo. I'm not. I'm just going into my little dream world. I have a dream world. It's great. I love it.
Jim Carrey has parlayed the circus in his head into movie stardom. Long before the red carpets and searing lights of Hollywood, there was family. Jim was the youngest of 4. Early on, it was apparent he had a gift for mimicry. In a series of homes around suburban Toronto, like millions of other kids, television was Jim Carrey's babysitter. But Jim Carrey soaked up the faces, the names, and the voices.
My name is Jimmy Carr, and I'm running for president.
He tried out his impressions on the family. His mother, Kay, or Mumsy, was often sick. Jim would cheer her up.
My mother taught me how to do Bruce Dern. I came home one day and she was going, "What do you want for supper?" And I said, "Can I use that, Mom?" She said, "Sure, that'd be real nice." No, my mom doesn't do that. I'm only kidding.
Jim also took his impersonations to school.
He's very slight. He did not have an athletic build at all, but he had this impish face, a real innocence, and I think if I had to label him with one word, he was a little gentleman.
Imagine how the little gentleman would crack up his classmates at St. Francis Xavier Primary in Burlington with his impersonations.
Lucy Darvatis, my grade 7 teacher, and she harnessed it. She actually said to me, if you stop, finishing your work and bothering the other students, then I'll give you 15 minutes at the end of the day.
The teacher, Lucy Darvatis, turned discipline into destiny.
It finally came to, hey, why don't you do an act for us, okay? But this is the limits that I'm setting. If you people want to see Jim do his act, in other words, entertain us, then you have to get your work done. And so someone would disrupt, remember the act? Or, you want Jim to do his act? And so I'd carry on this way. And with Jim, of course, he'd be good as gold.
When Jim went on to high school, he was already taking the next step to a career in stand-up comedy.
His name is Jim Carrey. He's an impressionist, and he's from Aldershot High School in Burlington.
This week at Divine Acreage, I'd like to report on the political situation down here in Canada. You should see it down here. It's quite a mess. And it's all so confusing, too, all this talk of separatism and everything. The whole country's like a huge search commercial. Why is that, Mark? Because they have two countries in one. Anyway, until next time, this is Mork from Mork, signing off. Nanu nanu.
They liked Jim's impressions here better than at his first live performance. He made his debut in the small basement club, Yuck Yucks, in downtown Toronto. But the small-town teenage impressionist didn't cut it with the club's owner.
Anyone could get on stage. That was our ethos. But our ethos also was, if you can't make them laugh, we have the obligation and the right to make fun of you to get that laugh. So Jim shows up, and he must have been 14 years old. 14 years old, in some ugly powder blue leisure suit from the sticks, and wants to go on. Well, we say, fine, he can go on. He goes on, and he does a real old-style vaudeville kind of inflected show with, he's doing impressions of people that have been dead for 50 years. And the audience is bored or booing. So I said, give him the hook. And as Jim's going to his act, he hooks the hook right around his neck, gives it a good yank, and Jim comes flying off stage. That was Jim's first appearance at Yuck Yucks.
Not the last time Jim Carrey would bomb, but a hardening experience for a 14-year-old.
It's not the fact that we hooked him off the stage. The fact is that a 14-year-old, any 14-year-old, had the guts to go up on what was at that point Toronto's hippest little comedy cult community and think that he could pull it off. That showed an outrageous amount of confidence.
Percy, Jim's father, manager, and co-writer, had driven him to that disastrous performance. Percy Carey had played the sax in a swing band, but he gave up his music career to take a safer job as a bookkeeper. Going to the Carey home was like dropping in on a non-stop rehearsal. Jim's father was a cut-up. The one-liners would be flying back and forth. Percy and Jim were working on the act all the time.
My dad does Jimmy Stewart.
How are you, Jim? About these marks in school today.
Did your parents think you were weird?
Well, luckily, my father had his own dysfunction going.
Yeah.
So it was like the competition,
When Jim was 14, disaster. Percy lost the safe job as a bookkeeper.
Percy sold his sax, gave up the idea of being a musician in order to support the family in a dull job, and then wound up losing the dull job, which was the ultimate humiliation. So he might as well, if he was going to be broke, he might as well have followed his dream.
Percy Carey then became the night security guard at a tire company called Titan Wheels. The family moved into the factory house. The children worked the night shift. Jim cleaned the floors and washrooms in the plant.
So the whole family was working at that point. We were poor at that point. And I had to work an 8-hour factory shift after school. So I went from like an A student and somebody who finishes and has fun to somebody who, like Charlie Brown, who couldn't understand the teacher. You know, it was just wonk, wonk, wonk after that. And I was sleeping in class.
Because of the 8-hour job.
Yeah.
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 Absolutely.
So it was a war in the factory, too. It was insane.
At the age of 16, an exhausted Jim dropped out of school. The Carreys hit rock bottom. They left Titan Wheels and for 8 months lived out of a VW van.
See, a lot of people don't know this, but I know a lot about the poor and stuff, because when I was about 14 or 15, my father lost his job and we actually became homeless.
The funny thing is that from the perspective of the Carrey family, living in the camper van wasn't the real horror.
Of course, I grew up in Canada, so I thought we had just gone camping, you know.
I mean, they look back on the camper van as the happy times because they were so glad to have escaped from Titan Wheels.
Like I'd say, Dad, are we by any chance living below the poverty line? And he'd say, no, son, we're rich as long as we have each other. Now get in the dumpster.
It was during that summer of '78, Jim made what would be the first of many comebacks. The family fortunes rode with him.
It provided them with sort of a future tense, you know. One day, Jim is going to make it, he's going to become a big star, and our ship is going to come in for the whole family.
I used to drive like 50 miles back and forth from Jackson's Point every second night or every night to do a set at Yuck Yucks for free. No pay. Not even a gas stub or anything, nothing.
Jim spent hours and hours developing characters. His act was coming together. He exploded onto the Toronto scene.
You know, I spend the majority of my lifetime staring in the mirror.
Later, man. You just gotta get into it. That's just a feeling.
But I'm not looking at me. I'm looking at Leonid Brezhnev. Tom Jones! Michael Landon's smiling.
People in the business began to notice.
There was just something about him that made me step back and say, who's that kid?
Did I spit on you there? Sorry. Those little blotches of wet stuff on your face mean that I'm working out here.
Jim was playing any club that would take him. A problem with Yuck Yucks. Mark Breslin didn't like comics who played other clubs. Carrey was banned, and if you didn't play Yuck Yucks, you didn't have a career.
Boycott the Jim Carrey Show. Don't go in there. Dangerous to mental health. Boycott the Jim Carrey Show. Boycott the Jim Carrey Show. Boycott the Jim Carrey Show.
Beatrice Spivak cut a deal to get Jim back into Yuck Yucks.
When I asked Mark for him to come back, he said, well, yes, he can come back and have a week at Yuck Yucks if he plays the Montreal Yuck Yucks for free for 1 week.
I was trying to carve out a niche for myself and a niche for my company, and it involved keeping everybody basically helping me as much as possible. Some people want to, you know, didn't see an obligation that way.
For a 19-year-old kid desperate to support his family, playing a free week was a bitter pill.
Ready?
Back in Toronto, the pressure was on. Yuck Yucks was packed with critics and agents. Jim had to make a big impact.
Thank you. I'm no fast. Amazing question.
What I would like to do if I'm, what I would like to do if I'm, is now go down into the audience.
We had an all-girls school who saw this, you know, very handsome, charming performer on stage, and they were screaming.
You like that, eh? You love it, right?
I mean, it was like seeing the Beatles. It's at that point that I stopped making phone calls out, and phone calls started to come in.
After sold-out performances at Yuck Yucks, Jim and Leatrice headed to New York City. Tougher crowds, more seasoned comics, but even they could see his talent.
There's a comic, older guy, who went by Uncle Dirty. And Uncle Dirty stood at the back of the club beside me, and he whispered, "He's not Lenny, but he's money."
Buoyed and confident, Jim wanted more. He got himself a new manager and headed west to Los Angeles, his first crack at the big show.
We got in fairly late in the day, LA time.
It would be a crucial visit.
It was about 9 o'clock we went out, something like that, and we decided to walk down Sunset Boulevard towards downtown LA. And we came across Grauman's Man's Chinese Theater. Jim was hopping from star to star and handprint and footprint. I mean, it was just, look who this is, and of course if he knew them, he'd do the voice. Once we had done this for about 10 or 15 minutes, he turned to me and he said, "I'm going to be here someday." I mean, we're talking about, he's sitting here, you know, we've got Lucille Ball, and I'm going to be here someday, and we're down trying to break into a comedy club. This is a big jump. And there was a movie theater down there, and sure enough, On Golden Pond this was the premiere of On Golden Pond. As soon as the movie began, he's starting to work on the voices. Henry Fonda's speaking and Jim is starting. And I'm going, well, this went on for the entire 2 hours of the movie. Movie ends. Great, exhausted. Got to be 1 or 2, and we've been flying all day and whatnot from Toronto, and let's go. No. We've got to see this again. Second time through, he knows what the scenes are. He's even memorized some of the lines. Now he's doing it in sync with them. And he's got it.
You want me to pick strawberries?
He does it all the way back up Sunset Boulevard as we're walking. He's now running the scenes down and doing both parts.
It's very simple, no man. You just bend over and pick them.
Bend over? Where are they?
He continued on in the hotel room. He was still going the next morning. I mean, I woke up with either Jack Nicholson or Henry Fonda or Katharine Hepburn at the foot of my bed going full tilt. I mean, living with him for 3 days in a hotel room was sort of like having most of Hollywood in the room with you. It just never quit.
Looking for strawberries.
I'll pay you to get the
The Golden Pond Act would pay off. And at 19, Jim Carrey had all but left Canada for good.
You could become a major strawberry picker.
Later, man. You just gotta get into it. That's just a feeling.
Hollywood, 1982. The launching pad for comedians was here on the Sunset Strip. If you wanted to score big in TV or the movies, you had to show your stuff here at the Comedy Store. To do that, Carrey chose yet another new manager, someone who could hustle up a full house.
My job was to be on the phone day and night, calling up everybody. I had tons of lists and calling them all up and just bug them to death until they came down there.
Hollis' pestering worked. Dozens of agents, producers, and casting directors packed the club to catch Jim's impressions. Among them was one of Hollywood's hottest TV producers.
At the end of this evening, he goes into this On Golden Pond thing, which is not only funny, but it is touching, and it is acting. You could clearly see that this guy was an actor.
Alan Burns had a string of hit shows. including The Mary Tyler Moore Show, Rhoda, and Lou Grant. Burns had the golden touch. His shows had won every award possible, and he was looking for a star for his new series, The Duck Factory. This looked like a huge break for Jim Carrey. Wanting to share his newfound success, Jim moved his parents down from Canada to Los Angeles.
When I used to hang out with Rodney Dangerfield, I used to work with Rodney Dangerfield, I'd invite my father backstage, and Rodney and him were like thick as thieves. Rodney loved my father because he was like a vaudeville guy. He's just like constant jokes, one-liners and stuff, and they would get into it. It was like tag team comedy. It was crazy.
I thought it was very kind of dear of him that he was kind of proud of them, and he'd bring them around, and here's my dad, and make sure they were okay. I thought that was kind of unusual.
Carrey was rushed into the series 2 weeks before shooting started. After one season, Alan Burns got to call every Hollywood player dreads.
I'll tell you why the show's not on the air. It isn't any good. It's not funny. There's nobody in the cast that I like. And I said, wait a minute, after we've got this guy, this hot kid named Jim Carrey. He said, I don't care who he is, he's not funny.
Do you wish you'd had the time to rewrite this guy?
Had I had a little more time and a little more exposure to Jim, that character would have been different. And maybe that show would have gone on for longer than it did and might have killed his career entirely.
Jim's first TV series tanked, a high-profile affair with Linda Ronstadt ended, and his first starring movie role in Once Bitten went nowhere. Jim Carrey was out of luck and out of money. He sent Mom and Dad home. Neither would return. After a big high at the beginning of the year, it all crashes and he sends his parents home. What kind of a state was he in?
Well, that was at the point when Jim sent them back where he was going through therapy, where he was re-examining what he wanted to do with his life. It affected him mentally, no question about that. I think it would affect anybody.
At the age of 21, Jim Carrey had bombed again. What have you learned about failure and all the things that you've done?
That it's a relative term, you know. There isn't failure unless you accept it, you know. There's been so many times along the way, you know, when I did the Duck Factory and that went away, and where people say, well, you had your shot, yeah, that's it, you know, and the people that make it are the people who just keep going.
Come and join me and a group of terrific entertainers for lots of music and laughter at a big concert in New Orleans.
Licking his wounds, Jim Carrey signed up for a CBC special with Canada's most famous impersonator. Working with Rich Little gave him a glimpse of what he could become.
And then he went to Las Vegas with Rich Little, and he realized that, in fact, he didn't want to wind up being Rich Little. He didn't want to wind up being in Las Vegas. And Cary Grant was in the audience when Rich Little was doing his act, and Rich Little went over and did shtick at Cary Grant's table. And in that moment, Jim Carrey suddenly thought, you know, I don't want to be Rich Little. I want to be Cary Grant. And that really changed his whole approach to his career. He was ready to dump his impressionist act and go in a new direction.
Jim went back to L.A. and back on stage. But this time, he wouldn't be hiding behind any famous faces. It was a huge gamble.
He certainly was a guy that when he went on, everyone would go into the back of the room. You know, the walls would be lined with comedians to see what Jim would do tonight. So I think everybody rooted him on. Nobody was saying, oh God, I wish he would do more impressions.
Jim was fearless, defying the basic laws of stand-up comedy. Make them laugh and stick with what works. Some nights, it wasn't pretty.
Get out. Think I'm kidding you?
Get out! Get out! Get out! God, get out! Oh, God!
I don't think you can actually do something interesting unless you're booed off the stage, unless you feel that. I used to go to the Comedy Store some nights and go, okay, now this is, I have to not be accepted tonight as my job. To not be liked, to not be accepted. And so I'd go up in front of the audience and start, you know, saying painful things and...
To the audience?
Yeah, sure, and then I'd start a fight.
And then if he was bombing, he would do this thing where he would pretend to be calling his wife, and he would call his wife as if he was doing great, but crying, and go, "We don't have to worry anymore, honey. Don't have to worry about making ends meet. Daddy's doing great." And he would always do that right when the crowd hated him the most.
Go. Let's go. Sometimes we heckle each other.
Uh-huh.
When we knew, okay, he's being really safe now. So they start to heckle from the back of the club. And one night, in the middle of my act, Sam Kinison threw a chair over my head.
Jim's inspiration and close friend was a comic fire breather, Sam Kinison. Carrey's relationship to Kinison led to a lot of late-night mayhem. They'd close down the Comedy Store at 2 a.m. and hit the Sunset Strip. Sam Kinison tore away a lot of Jim Carrey's restraint.
I watched a hell of a lot of comedians come up from the time I started in comedy clubs, and Sam was, one of the first ones I sat back and went, man, this guy is really doing something different, He's really challenging people, and I saw him night after night at 2 in the morning, chase half the audience out of the Comedy Store, and I said, if you can be willing to do that, then you're going to do something different with your art, and so I've been chasing people out ever since.
After 2 years of wild experiments, Carrey was no closer to stardom. He married Comedy Store waitress Melissa Womer. They had a daughter, Jane. And then a terrible shock. Sam Kinison was killed in a car accident. Some nights, Jim Carrey took his Nissan up Mulholland Drive. And looking down on Hollywood, the most mythic Carrey story of them all took place. In a dark moment, a leap of faith, Jim Carrey wrote himself a check for $10 million for acting services rendered. On Jim's next trip home to Canada, it was clear the innocence was gone, but the comedy was intact.
He's a nice, naive person who's suddenly thrown into this world of Hollywood sophistication and decadence. You're describing a TV character. Does that describe you?
Well, I suppose so, yeah, because I'm totally affected and different now. No one even knows me.
What did you do?
I phone my family and they go, what did you become, man?
Did you get into this drug scene down there?
I have some here right now, Paul, if you care to partake. If we could just can we have a mirror and some...
When you first go to L.A., you sort of get swept up in the, Jack and Angelica are here, Jack, hi, how are you?
How are you? It's good to see you, Jim. Welcome to the ranks of the infamous. Looks like we're gonna have ourselves a nuclear holocaust.
It's a crazy world down there, but then, you are who you are, and you sort of, at a certain point, I just got back to, just like doing what I do.
Back in L.A., Jim was about to bounce back again. He beat out 2,000 actors to become the white guy on a hit black TV show, In Living Color. But more importantly, unlike Duck Factory a decade earlier, it let Carrey be Carrey.
In Living Color finally gave him a chance to break loose and show all the different aspects of his talent, including his enormous talent for parody and mimicry and lampoon.
Especially after a grueling afternoon of deep power squats.
And it also allowed him to express some anger.
You're getting ready to serve up some of this spiny sea urchin. You're high on MSG. Somebody says, look, there's Chairman Mao showing everybody his ginseng root. You go to salute him. Next thing, you know. You look like Jacques Cousteau in a trauma unit.
Which I think you see in the Fire Marshal Bill things, and you particularly see it in the amazing Dysfunctional Home Show. That is just fantastic material.
Once the family gets a taste of that, they're gonna... they're gonna...
Now Jim was ready for a huge leap forward.
He knew he wanted to be a movie star.
On his way to cashing the $10 million check.
Got the pumps.
In Hollywood, it's important to know that show business is two words, show and business. Jim Carrey's 18-month rise to the highest paid actor in the world is a case study in the art of the deal.
When Jim was making nothing, he thought he was worth $20 million.
Meet Team Carrey. Eric Gold is the manager. Nick Stevens is the agent.
We were ready, and we were passionate that he could become, after Eddie and Steve Martin and Robin, the next guy.
We felt that Bill Murray, with his sort of attitude and who he was a good template as well, and we wanted to find all the scripts that were left over. The joke was it still had, like, stains on it from somebody's lunch, because it was like everybody had read it.
For $350,000, Jim Carrey's performance in Ace Ventura would ignite a frenzy of wheeling and dealing.
We liked Ace Ventura. We worked cheap in the picture. You know, the feeling is that once you start to win, then you can change the equation. The Mask also was done before Ace Ventura came out. He worked for $450,000 on The Mask. Both those pictures hit, one bigger than the next, and then Dumb and Dumber came down the pike.
All right, I'm going to give him a rough idea of the film. You got two characters, Dumb and Dumber, right? One of them is a limo driver. He has a love interest. He finds out she's going to Aspen, follows her there. Actually follows her to Aspen. And as you can see, it's a very funny premise.
You dumb guys. Get together. Go on a trip.
Well, we were ready to make a deal, you know, from the 450 that was not as significant as it turned out to be on Dumb and Dumber before Ace came out. And the studio played their cards and we played ours.
Two things we knew. We knew that we liked the movie, and we knew that some of the key moments in that movie took place in snow, and they were running out of time.
We were begging him, give him the money, you know, it's gonna be worth it.
And we knew that that snow was a gun to their head, because if they didn't shoot it soon, they couldn't shoot it for a year.
For a while they thought about changing it to a summer. He goes out there to Aspen in the summer. It wouldn't have been as fun, but, you know, that was our... that's what we were thinking of.
They come back to us after Ace Ventura opens at $12.5 million, and now he's a movie star.
Yeah, I remember being in an office down the hall here, and when we were into the 2s and 3s and 4 million, that's when the ride got interesting.
We just kept saying no to the deal, and it was 1, and it turned into 2, that turned into 4, that turned into 5, that turned into 6. And honestly, Jim was a little nervous, because Jim was a guy who lived in a Volkswagen van with his family at one point, and, you know, at times he would say, you sure we shouldn't just say yes to $5 million? When we got to $7 million, the head of the studio of production, Mike DeLuca, said to us, you know what, you can probably get a little bit more, but if you go beyond this, you're going to really be having such ill will towards him that it just won't be worth it. And I'd rather just take it at 7 or don't do it, because it won't be good.
The tide had turned. Now the offers poured in.
Veterans of the business call us and say, we would like Jim Carrey to be the Riddler.
We knew he'd kill as the Riddler.
But more important than all of this was a deal that was being hatched even as Jim was shooting Batman.
It was an intense negotiation. They came with their best and last offer, which would have been the most ever paid for a comedian. And we passed. Go ahead. You can say it. You're a genius. We passed the day before Batman premiered.
What did you pass at? What was the offer then?
$17.5 million.
Ultimately, Team Carrey would sign to do this new project at a record fee, $20 million. Hollywood history. But would Jim Carrey play it safe?
Let's see that in an instant replay.
With millions of kids addicted to his slapstick characters, he was suddenly going to be someone completely different.
Doing the Cable Guy wasn't much different than what he did by bailing on his impressionist act. He had this very solid, career, and then he says to everyone, I want to go farther, I want to be more creative, I want to take more chances, I want to challenge you, so check this out.
Let me help you wash up. Cleanliness is next to godliness.
In Cable Guy, Jim was Mr. Nasty.
You're on a big date.
And his message to the kids who loved him was a dark rebuke. TV addiction is no joke. In dollar terms, Team Carrey had shown amazing consistency. 6 straight movies, each grossing more than $100 million. Oddly, the man known for talking out of his ass had shown excellent judgment.
The most important thing I think people overlook is it's about taste. Jim Carrey he made good choices. He hasn't made a bad movie, since Ace Ventura. He's made, different kinds of movies, but he has not made a bad movie.
Jim's latest choice, Man on the Moon, was yet another gamble, and one that brought his box office streak to an end. The Carrey name guaranteed sold-out openings, but moviegoers didn't like Andy Kaufman, and the film didn't do well. While Jim's performance was rewarded with a Golden Globe,
Jim Carrey,
the silver medal of Hollywood Awards, the Academy was not impressed. His fellow actors are still not convinced that Jim Carrey is the real deal. For the second year in a row, he was denied an Oscar nomination for Best Actor.
So what do you desire now? Love.
But beyond the hit movies, something else is missing.
Well, I guess we're going to have ourselves a nuclear holocaust.
Now, after 2 marriages, the $20 million man is a bachelor again. In December of '99, Jim spent a weekend in Los Angeles promoting Man on the Moon to the North American press. Half the arriving journalists thought Jim was involved with co-star Courtney Love. By Monday, there was no question that Jim was actually romancing his next co-star, Renee Zellweger. This may be the perfect way to promote an upcoming film, but is it the most effective way to live your personal life?
Everything's cool for 6 months, you're on the set, everybody's doing everything for you, and then when you get home, there's real life. And then it's like, well, who's, like you left the toilet seat up. Well, I don't need this. Give me another movie, all right. Who's in it? Selma Hayek? Well, all right. You know what I mean?
His second marriage to Dumb and Dumber co-star Lauren Hawley found them both paraded around Hollywood. The union was hot, fast, and photogenic. His first marriage to Melissa Womer ended as Jim's movie career took off.
It has been tough, and it's been a long journey and a painful one because, I don't like to hurt anybody, but there's been, I'm the guy who's been married twice. I never wanted to be that guy, that sucks, it sucks when you go out with someone and you have to, eventually get to, twice I didn't marry, and you have to be that guy. It's a horrible thing, but it's a learning process, and And I've learned that I can't fix my mom anymore.
Both wives settled with Team Carrey, but the divorces are a flaw in the grand plan. I did an interview with him where I asked him what he still desired. What do you think he said?
Love.
Carrey's biographer offers one explanation for the marital difficulties.
There's a level of obsession and desperation to Jim's life, which I think comes out of the experiences that he had as a child. And I think that would make somebody extremely hard to live with. And I think he's very aware of that.
Jim Carrey is the man in the middle of the star-making machine. He's had to develop a very strong sense of what belongs to the world and what belongs to him.
I've gotten really good at kind of judging what's fair to ask me for and what's not.
Yeah.
And that I can't be attached to a result. If they go away and they feel like they didn't get enough from me, then I can't worry about it. You know, there's too many people in the world, and it's like, you know, I'm nice to people. I like people. You know, I like saying hi to people, and I like that they like me. It's great, but don't ask me for the tag off my underwear, because you're not getting it.
Within Jim's tightly controlled life, Team Carrey is working on next year's projects. The idea is to build a star for the ages.
You can be of your generation, or you can transcend any generation. And I think what Jim's looking for is to have a career that will transcend any one generation.
The next time he opens up the circus in his head, who will come out?
Seems like no matter what happens, no matter how bad things get, Jimmy Stewart can look at it in a positive way. Well, I guess we're going to have ourselves a nuclear holocaust. Well, everybody come over to the window. Look at that mushroom cloud. Isn't that beautiful? And last but not least, James Dean.
As a boy, Jim Carrey escaped the reality of his life by inhabiting the 100 faces he soaked up from television and the movies. Those characters brought him to this dizzying level of fame. But what does the great reinventor have left?
I think Jim Carrey is going to be around for an awfully long time, not only because I think he has a great talent, but because he's demonstrated that he doesn't give up when other people would give up. So no defeat or humiliation stops Jim Carrey.
The people that make it are the people who just keep going. Keep going. And Rodney Dangerfield used to say to me, just make the, man, you got to make the tank strong enough that nothing can stop it, man.
Percy Carey died in 1994, just as his son was becoming a movie star. At his funeral, Jim slipped that $10 million check he'd written in the Hollywood Hills into his dad's pocket.
Jim Carrey's next movie is the romantic comedy Me, Myself, and Irene. Maybe this one will earn him that elusive Oscar. That's our show for tonight. We'll be back in 2 weeks with the story of 3 rising stars. Talented.
I just absolutely love music.
Driven.
I've made a lot of sacrifices in my life.
And oh, so young. Life and Times, Tuesday night at 9.
winner of 9 Academy Awards, including Best Picture.
I promise. I'll come back for you. I promise. I'll never leave you.
Ray Fiennes, Kristen Scott Thomas, The English Patient. A 2-part special begins Sunday night on CBC.